Is solo DPS investment worth it? I thought this would be a pretty cool new video to make because, as you guys know, on my most recent WUWA account, I'm basically just running 2 solo DPSs with sequence investment, and then I've also ran my S6Q on solo as well, so I think I have a decent opinion on this. Now, I would like to basically instantly get this out of the way. It's never gonna be the most meta choice, right? That's never gonna be the case. Because the reality is that having a full team, and especially with best in slot teammates, will basically always do more damage cost versus cost to a solo DPS with just sequence investment. Even some of the best cases in the game, like Cartethia, this still applies to. So with that being said, let's get straight into it. In my opinion, the biggest benefit that you get from running solo DPSs and just continuously investing into their sequences is that you don't need to build any other characters, right? You don't need to worry about leveling up new weapons. You don't need to worry about leveling up the character. You don't need to worry about farming for their forte. You don't need to worry about getting a good amount of decent echoes for them. None of this do you need to worry about, right? So your workload is significantly less, which convenience-wise feels absolutely amazing. On my Cartethia account, it genuinely feels like I am overloading on mats. I have like 10,000 plus tuners, thousands of gold experience. I have so many fucking shells, and it's like I'm never gonna use them probably, right? At least not anytime soon, because I mean I don't need to, because I have such highly sequence invested in DPSs that I just don't need to go out of my way to build other teammates and build other characters. It'd just be me wasting resources because, I don't know, maybe I want to have fun and try something else, right? But it would never be out of necessity to make my characters clear, which is really, really nice, right? Now, here's the thing. Not all of these solo DPSs are built the same, and this is something that a lot of people should be aware of. In my opinion, the 3 best solo DPSs as of current are probably Brant, Yuno, and as well as Cartethia. You may have been able to notice the pattern. These are people who can either sustain themselves or have such a high amount of HP that it's the same thing, right? So Brant has amazing sequence investment, some of the strongest in the game, and because of Lupa, he actually has a decently strong hyper carry team if that's something you want to go for. But of course, we're talking about solo here, so that's one of his best options for sure. You have Yuno, same thing, good sequence investment, good main DPS potential, so she works when you get her like S3 plus. And then Cart has basically the strongest early sequence jumps in the entirety of the game, right? So Cart is a complete beast against all types of endgame content. The reason I stress sustained DPSs is because in most of the time, right, you can get by with high sequence DPSs who are really strong, who don't have this same sustained capability, 100%. However, I mainly say this if you are a connoisseur of like high difficulty bosses such as hollows, right? Now, this is a problem I encountered when I used both Ameth and mostly my QU1. One of the most recent hollow additions, the Reactor Husk boss in Lahai Roy's hollows, I actually tried him with my QU1 and it was a nightmare. And it's not like I have a skill issue. I've already max starred all of the previous hollows on that account, and I first tried the last Lahai Roy hollow, right? But the problem with this one was the attack frequency. And the issue with QU1 is that even at S6, obviously he has no sustain abilities, but his forte is his main damage output. And this forte, in order to get the full damage out of it, he needs to be on field for like a good 2 seconds, right? If you don't have him on those 2 seconds and you dodge to, not get hit, you're going to lose a big part of damage. And that is exactly what has happened when I tried using my QU1 against this newest boss. The attack frequency is just so fast that I am forced to lose an insane amount of damage when I do finally build up towards the forte, making the boss fight take fucking forever, which is really, really miserable. Because keep in mind, if I don't dodge in 2 hits, I'm just dead, right? So that is why I stress getting sustained DPSs, or a DPS who just has an insanely high amount of HP like Cartethia, because otherwise your struggles against some hollow bosses that can counter your DPS will not feel good. It will feel really, really bad to use, right? So we've talked about hollows and DPSs and the sequence investment and what the best DPS to invest into is. The fact that you don't have to build teammates and build weapons and all this shit. Is there really anything left? In my opinion, yes. One of the greatest things about being able to just purely sequence invest into a DPS, and the main advantage, is that you're able to make what is most likely one of your favorite characters, if you're investing this hard into them, just be on field 24/7, right? Like, that character is literally always in combat, always in open world exploration, usable absolutely everywhere. And I do believe personally there is definitely value in that, because I mean, most people would obviously like to just have one character that they really love be able to do absolutely everything without needing to constantly do rotations and switch into other characters to make them actually usable for clearing endgame content, right? It's just pretty cool, it's pretty fun, and I love it personally. Others can disagree. Maybe they like the high ceiling of Wuwa, they like quick swap and shit like that in team rotations, and I wouldn't say that I necessarily disagree. However, I can be a connoisseur of both, right? I like convenience, and I also like a high skill ceiling and difficult rotations if that's what I'm looking for. But realistically, most of the time I do prefer convenience, and so a S6 cart, an S3 Ameth, an Overworld, an endgame, not needing teammates and still being good enough to clear all endgame content, that has a lot of value, which feels really, really, really good. I don't need to go out of my way to learn rotation. I don't need to go out of my way to learn a guide. I don't need to go out of my way to learn quick swap, because I'll clear anyways, right? If this were any other game, I wouldn't really be using this as an argument, but like in Wuwa, you can literally buy sequences with Coral that you passively gain from pulling. For example, I've gotten an S3 Ameth from pure pulls. What this means is I could go from S3 to S5 if I had enough corals for it, and then I'd only need to pull one more copy of Ameth raw to be able to get her S6, which is huge. That is absolutely fucking amazing. It's just something that Wuwa has. Now, I will say these corals don't just rain from the sky, right? They are not easy to attain enough to be able to consistently buy sequences all the time. But my point is, after about, maybe nearly half a year or half a year straight up, it is pretty likely that you might have built up enough coral to purchase a sequence, which makes stuff like this significantly more attainable as compared to the other game I play, which is HSR, right? So I think S3 is obviously the sweet spot for being able to get solo DPSs who can clear all endgame content and not struggle incredibly badly, obviously S6 is the best investment. However, that's like really far for a lot of people, so I will be using S3 mostly as the standard here. Even just S3 in solo DPSs is enough for clearing all endgame content, in my opinion. Even if you're getting shilled, you can probably clear with S0 at times, right? Which is also pretty cool. But S3 is definitely that sweet spot so that it lasts for quite a while and it's a character you really like. The last thing I want to talk about here is, investment and opportunity. In my opinion, one of the greatest things about going into sequences for a DPS you really like is the fact that if you ever do change your mind and you do decide to invest into their team, the amount of damage that you get in return because their baseline is now like S3 plus is astronomical. Today I was actually talking about this on my stream where, for example, Ameth at S0, her weapon's about a 23% damage increase, right? And when you look at her team rotation and her optimal team, her premium team with S0R1, her weapon makes about a 200,000 to 300,000 damage difference total, right? That is pretty significant, but you can easily get away with just using something like an EOG, take that 23% loss, and you'll still clear fine. But when you make the baseline of your character so much stronger, even though the percentage may stay the same, the percentage jump, the amount of damage increase you actually get per rotation isn't. So like, for example, S6 Ameth, because this is just an easy benchmark, S6 Ameth is almost exactly 3x as strong as an S0 Ameth. So this means that this 2 to 300k number now becomes more like 6 to 900k, right? So just getting her signature weapon makes that big of a difference at that level of investment because of how much stronger your character is. So imagine just how astronomical more the difference would be giving her her best in slot partner, which is Lene, or her future Fusion Burst sub DPS on the anniversary, and then also finishing it off with like a Mornai or an SK, right? It would be fucking glorious. And in my opinion, this is always the best way to invest into a character that you really like. The reason I say this is sometimes horizontal investment can kind of backfire, right? Some good examples, in my opinion, are like Zeshi and Yinlin. Let's say you are a Carlotta main who pulled Zeshi because she was part of the best in slot team for Lotta at the time, right? Nowadays, Zeshi is no longer best in slot for Lotta, Lene is. So if you're really a Lotta lover, a Lotta main, you'll obviously pull Lene to get that increased damage jump that she gives towards Lotta, and you may also pull Mornai to be able to get breaks more often, right? However, this is where you're kind of like losing pulls, because now that you're no longer using Zeshi and you've replaced Zeshi with Lene because, well, Zeshi and characters like Yinlin have been power crept by how much stronger a generalist buffer Lene is, then you've kind of just lost an entire character's worth value, right? So this can't happen if you invest into sequences, because no matter what, your character, or that character that you invested into sequences for, will always retain that power level, and they will always be able to only gain from stronger and stronger and stronger supports releasing. While horizontal investment, sometimes you don't see the fruits of that investment down the line, and you're just kind of slightly upgrading your S0 DPS as a new best in slot support comes out over time, but it never adds up anywhere near to the value of getting sequences. So that's just my opinion. A lot of the time it is more worth it going into sequences for a DPS if they aren't too niche, because they can get a new best in slot support like a year down the line if they're a more general type of character, similar to Gion, right? Like Gion's best in slot team went from like Gion Mortefi Varina to Gion Mortefi SK to Gion Chacona SK to Gion Uno SK. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's constantly changing. You need to constantly upgrade characters on the team, and in the end, you're not really improving the total team's damage output as much as you could if he had good sequence investment and you really invested into that. So that's all I have to say for this video. In my opinion, it has its positives, it has its negatives. Meta wise, it's not really worth it in the slightest, but for fun, convenience, and for investing into a character you really like to last as long as possible, I'd say it's actually definitely worth it and a very viable way of investing in Wuwa. Love you all. Hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great night. Peace out.